Hello, everybody. This is Jake Leonchko, and you're tuned in to Public Huddle. Today, we are fortunate to have none other than our beloved Senator of the 4th District of the state of California, Senator Marie Alvarado-Gil.
Thank you.
And she's been so gracious to accommodate us in her conference room here in her office in Modesto to have a little conversation about herself, about her affiliations now with the Republican Party, and whatever else she wants to talk about. This is her opportunity to help us get to know her better and understand her priorities in the Senate. Maybe tell us a little bit about her own personal values and how that might align with with her objectives as a senator, and we'll leave her to talk. Some people have asked me, what's with the hyphenated name of Alvarado-Gil? And you say it is Gil, right?
That's right.
But
Gil.
in the original Spanish of that will be Gil.
Gil con like a J
Like
sound.
a J,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so what's the origin of the hyphenated name, which is Alvarado? Is that your maiden name, or how is it?
Well, I've been married before. I have 3 amazing kiddos from previous marriages, and I found my soulmate, Cesar Alvarado, who is my husband. And he raised 3 kids, I raised 3 kids, and when we combined our family, we knew we weren't going to have more children of our own, and we just thought it was really special to solidify our union of families with both our last names. So Gil is my maiden name, and Alvarado is Cesar's last name, yes.
Cesar.
So we were both Alvarado-Gil.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You both adopted that
Yeah.
formula of the name.
Yeah, we both adopted it.
Now, I understand you worked in previously in the field of education.
I did.
You were a teacher.
I was an administrator, yes.
Administrator of a charter school, is
That's
that
right?
Home school?
Several charter schools.
Oh, several. Okay. Yeah. Well, I homeschool my 7 children.
Oh, wonderful. Why did you choose to do that?
Am I the one being interviewed now?
Sorry.
Well, you know, we share something in common.
Yeah.
Part of my professional career was spent in education.
Okay.
So I was an accidental academician. I never planned for it. One day I was just on vacation.
Yeah.
And I went to visit a branch of my alma mater university. And right there and then, in that visit, I got asked,
Okay.
"What are you doing here?" I said, "Visiting." Give me your resume. I said, why? I mean, I said, we need teachers. At that time, well, there's a background to it. I won't bore you with that story now. But anyway, I was in transition professionally. And I said, well, you know, what will I lose? Here's my resume. That same afternoon, they interviewed me. A panel of professors interviewed me. I got hired the same day.
Well, congratulations. They must have known your value right away.
And then in 2 days, I was in the classroom without any preparation, not knowing what I was doing. And so anyway.
Well, as you know, there's a big need for educators all throughout our state.
Yes.
California, unfortunately, is at the bottom rung of performance public education. So, you know, that's what really propelled me into this role. I mentioned I raised 3 kids, and 2 of them have special needs, and it was really difficult to navigate as a single parent our public education system, which you would think that is one of the most essential responsibilities of government, right? It's to provide public services for all. And, you know, if our kids are not doing okay, then our communities can't as well.
No.
So.
And to continue my story, to answer your question, precisely because of that background in education, when I started having my own children, I said, no way am I going to expose them to what's going on there. So we chose to homeschool.
That's wonderful.
So
I think I would have homeschooled if I could. But because I was a single parent, I often worked 2 jobs. And, you know, thinking back, and now I have my grandkids, and we're thinking about whether or not we can homeschool, but we are all pitching in. Right? Because I mean, the public education system right now, or your traditional public education system, is still just as flawed, if not more flawed now than it was when my kids were in school 20 years ago.
Well, let me tell you, I was just invited to a small group of community leaders to meet the new superintendent of Modesto City Schools.
Great.
Yeah, that was just 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And what did we see there?
What did you see?
Yeah. Sadly, it's going to be DEI all over again.
That's upsetting.
Okay.
Yeah.
She gave us her 5-point agenda of what she's going to do. And in each of those, you can already deduce it's DEI all over again. And so I had to ask her, look, the national average of students who test at their level stands at 39%. That's already very poor across the board.
That's a failure in any business model.
Exactly, right? In Modesto, it's even worse. It's 28%.
Wow.
Okay? So I asked her, and this is only happening because of the different variations of the DEI ideology that began right after the civil rights movement in the 1960s. See, we have seen different ways by which DEI came into the picture. We only call it DEI now.
Right, it has a name now.
The name now, the label is like that, but this thing has been, can trace its history to the 1960s. And since the 1960s precisely, if you look at the trajectory of failure of the educational system, it follows very closely the trajectory of the progress of DEI. You see, the more they push DEI as a concept in schools, the more you see the opposite trajectory, downfall of academic performance.
DEI has been a real hot button issue in California, and I think that what it really comes down to is parent rights. Right? If we as parents, and you and I have shared our ancestral immigration story with one another, but what it comes down to is we as parents know our children best. And we know what their gifts are, where their obstacles are, and it may be a family situation like yours where you were able to homeschool your kids, or like mine where you have one parent raising several kids. And when we rely on the traditional public education system to educate our kids, we want to make sure that they're strong in math and reading and science. And of course we want them to be great critical thinkers. But I as a parent and you as a parent, we still hold that right to be able to educate our children on social issues and issues of faith. And that's one of those areas that as an administrator in education and later serving on school boards, I really struggled with that. Not personally because I know where my values are, but how to articulate it to a community that is being fed these social justice issues and saying these are the priorities for our kids. When I'm looking at the numbers just like you, and when the majority of our kids in a particular school district cannot read and write, that should be our focus. And this has consistently been one of those areas in California that is mind-boggling, that we are not putting more of an emphasis on the failures of California in our public education system. And this isn't about our teachers failing or our administrators failing or even our kids. This is about a public education system that has been failing and leadership at the state of California that continues to look the other way. So let's just kind of put the blame where it goes, because I see teachers, hard workers, every single day trying to build those connections with our kids. And I know parents want the best for their kids. They want them to be successful. Like, who would not? But when our kids are dealing with issues at school that consistently matches them to failures, whether it's academic failures or social failures or even questioning their identity, that to me is putting us in a situation where public education is more of a risk to our kids than a benefit.
True.
Yeah.
True. And it will only get worse with AB 84.
Yeah, well, I get a lot of bills that come across my desk, as you know, and every year we recycle numbers. So sometimes I get constituents that say, Senator, how did you vote on this? Or what was your stance on that? And I'm going to just tell you, it doesn't stick in my head.
Yeah,
but if
yeah,
you tell
I
me what it was
understand that,
about,
yeah.
we can talk about it. But
Yeah, though it's this latest bill of Representative
Is this
Marstucci, yeah,
Martucci? Okay,
yeah,
yes.
the one from
Yeah.
L.A. and well, he wants to. He proposed this bill, AB 84, to have tighter measures on homeschoolers, on charter schools by and you know the way that he wants to audit it is by counting how many hours homeschool students sit through a program, right?
Yeah.
I said, you cannot do that because we don't do that as homeschoolers.
Right.
You don't understand what homeschooling is all about
It's
for
an
you.
example of government coming into your house and
Yeah.
telling you how to
And what to
parent
do,
again,
exactly.
right? So this is where California, the supermajority in California, is so disconnected from the everyday Californian, is that they believe that they can come into our homes and dictate the way that we parent our kids, and to say to us, we know best. It's insulting, frankly. I mean, I remember when I was a charter school parent and I was helping to open new charter schools and working with parents on a better public school option for them. The number one piece of information that we would share is the performance results in both math and science and reading, right? And parents, I mean, this is all public information. And parents would say, well, I thought this was a good school where my child was going. And when you started to give them the data, it was an easy choice to say, let's build our own school. And some parents decided to do homeschooling for various reasons, right? Again, you know, not all kids mature at the same level. You know, just because they're in a certain grade doesn't mean that they're socially or mature enough to learn about certain material, particularly sexually explicit material. I think as parents, we preserve our right over what is being taught to our children, and I want to have a say. And so I think that's, for me, is why the charter school movement was so attractive, because I was able to raise my kids in charter schools that I helped to found and helped to lead in, but also to create those opportunities for other parents that were having the same struggles.
And we should continue to fight
Absolutely.
on that. And
absolutely. It's an uphill battle.
parental rights, or
Right.
I understand there's some bills pending there. I also don't know the numbers now. But,
Okay, we'll have to look them up. Yeah, part B of this, of this interview.
Now, ma'am, when you switch parties, right?
Yeah.
That's always seems to be the thorn in the side of a lot of people. You said that you, and I quote here, "I've had a front row seat to witness a supermajority push California in the wrong direction, having grave effect on our once golden state."
Yeah.
If you were to pick 1, 2, 3, or however many, what would you say might be among the major pitfalls of the Democratic Party and where they stirred our state? And how do you propose to turn back the ship?
Yeah. So that's a huge question. So I think, you know, one, just to kind of start about when I re-registered. And re-registering as a Republican was the kind of formal transition, but the signs were there way before. I've always been pretty moderate in my values, and this was the first time that I ran for office. So my voting record really did reflect who I am as a person, as well as the constituents that I represent in Senate District 4. And I am a hands-on leader. So having conversations with my constituents, picking up the phone call, talking to elected leaders before I take a vote is an everyday occurrence for me. So when I was tackling certain issues in the legislature and wanting to be an independent voice for my constituents, I hit more brick walls than soft, comfy cushions, if you will, because there is a institutional regiment amongst the supermajority of the California Democratic Party, in that you fall in line or we will sabotage you. We will make sure that you don't get reelected, or we will make sure that you suffer in some shape or form. And we've seen this in the Bible in many different instances, right? So, if there's anything that the Democrats have learned from our faith, is that, we've seen things happen in the past that don't work out well, but yet we continue doing the same things, right? So, I learned very early on that having an independent voice as a Democrat in the state Senate was punishable by something pretty outrageous. But for me, it's never been about whether or not I can get reelected or not. It's been about public service. And I was elected for 4 years to serve the public. And I have wholeheartedly done that as a public servant, not as a politician. And I think sometimes that's against the grain, or people tend to rebuke that and be like, what's her real motives? Yeah. And I'll just tell you, I am first and foremost a parent, now a grandparent, and lifelong Californian. And I have seen the opportunities that our country has given to my family, to my ancestors. And I have also seen that the life that I had as a young person, my kids, my grandkids, are farther away from reaching that California dream. And we consistently are taken down this road. So when you ask about like the top 2 or top 3 things, one, it's around just the difference between our Republican Party, which I see as a party of honor and integrity, and then the Democrats of today, because it wasn't always like this. The Democratic Party today is very egocentric and very power-driven. When your first threat is, if you do this, I'm going to make sure you don't get reelected, that's about power. That's not about performance or even public service. So, I'm a little cheeky when it comes to that, and I tend to, say things not as a politician, but I say things straight, and, I don't always polish it up well, and that doesn't go over well, right? Yeah,
I think that should be the least of your concern, because that's where people see the real you and the transparency of your character.
And that's the real California voter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? It's like we have big feelings and we have big opinions on what's good for our family, for our community, for our businesses. And when the state of California or the Democratic Party leadership comes in and says, no, this is how you should do this, or no, you can't trust your own parenting skills, we're going to parent your children for you, or no, your minors shall have more rights over their bodies and their decisions, and you as a parent, we're just going to take that away from you because we think that we'll do better as a government. Those are the things that really sit with you. And having that front row seat was also being part of those backroom conversations, right? And really understanding the performance etiquette of the Democratic Party. And when their number one goal is to hold the supermajority, not make California more affordable, not make education more accessible, not build transparency and accountability in the way that we spend tax dollars in California, that for me was a big punch in the gut, because that's what told me that we are so far away from being just a few steps away. We are far gone. That far left has really taken us down a road. And I'm afraid, I'm afraid that if we don't course correct, I'm afraid for our children and our grandchildren. Because, we're seeing it right now, right? When you start to look at real data, like the ability for young people to purchase homes, for example. I don't know about you, Jake, but I bought my first home when I was 21. And that was, with 2 incomes. I had 2 little kids. Between my kids and my husband's kids, they're all in their 20s, and they all still need financial support from their parents. And, we're investing in their abilities to go to trade school, start their businesses, or to go to the university. We have 2 in the university right now. And this is our investment in them so that they can fly, right? So they can build their lives. But the reality is, what we were able to do in our 20s, our kids may or may not be able to do it in their 30s. So they're making decisions now whether or not they want to be parents. And so now we're seeing the level of new births in California go down. We're seeing businesses leave the state. I mean, these are all signs, real data, real signs that California is on the wrong direction.
In fact, many have left the state.
Many have left the state, or don't, are not feeling enthusiastic or even hopeful of sticking it out here, right? I think for the first time, even my husband has asked me, he says, we need to look at our retirement outside of California. And that breaks my heart because everything of our roots, of our family, our traditions, our friends are here in California, and we shouldn't be forced to leave the place we call home because our government can't get it together.
That's why we're here to try
That's
to fix
why
it.
we're here. That's why we're here. So, I think Proposition 1 was one of those situations that really, opened my eyes to the level of power hungriness in the Democratic Party. Really focusing, this destructive proposition around family values. I mean, we should be allowed to dictate what happens to our bodies, not the government. As I am pro-family in many of my values and decisions that I've made. And I just think that, the Democrats want to divide us. That is their number one goal. Because if they can keep us divided, then our party can't grow. So I have become a threat in that situation because I know how to grow our party. And I'm talking to moderate Democrats on the daily about re-registering Republican. And you've seen it. You've seen it with other electives that have come over, strong leaders in California that have said, enough is enough, I'm re-registering Republican. I've had conversations with veterans and seniors and young people. It really does help to emphasize that I'm not an anomaly, right? The California voters have said over and over again, Democrats don't represent us in our values. They don't represent us in what we see the future of California to be. I mean, just in this last election, we saw overwhelmingly, all right, and this was the first time I voted for Trump, and I will say that out loud. But
that's one of the things you were being criticized for.
But I wasn't
you didn't
the only
endorse
one.
him, but okay.
But I wasn't the only one for the first time to vote for Trump. He won every swing state in the nation, right? 10 counties in California flipped from blue to red because of President Trump. That tells you something. That tells you that those of us who were moderate Democrats or no party preference voters saw hope and continue to see hope in President Trump's leadership. And this is, coming from people that have been, either active in politics or not active in politics, right? So those are signs that are telling us that we're headed in the right direction. But if we continue to let the Democrats divide us as a Republican Party, if we continue to shut the door to new moderate Democrats re-registering as Republicans, and if we question the integrity or the validity of someone like me that makes a decision to say, you know what, I was wrong. I am not a Democrat, and make that decision to move forward as Republicans and fight for our values, we are going to have to take control of our future. So.
Very, very nice to hear because, in fact, I remember when you switched parties, Senator McGuire, was it he, who said, oh, congratulations to the Republicans. They just gained a pro-LGBTQ, pro-abortion, pro-choice, pro-everything, So congratulations to the MAGA movement.
It was a messy divorce. We'll just put it that way. It was a very messy divorce.
But would you give us an opportunity to clarify that? What would you say about your stance about those issues? Because number one, you're talking about divisiveness and all that. It's
that was a very divisive comment.
A very divisive comment. And then there was also the issue of some of the votes that you had cast in the Senate that were leaning more towards the priorities of the Democrats along these lines, right? But as I said, every saint has a past. Every sinner has a future, okay? We cannot just be condemning people just because of how they voted or behaved in the past. We have to give them a chance to show that they are a recovering sinner or whatnot you want to call it. I don't know, but let's give people a chance to prove that there is change, right? There's change happening, and that there is an opportunity for growth in the right direction, right? So would you please tell us, where do you actually stand when it comes to the LGBTQ issues, to the pro-life marriage issues?
Yeah.
What can you say to us about that?
Well, I think there's a lot to say. First of all, I think, someone who's wearing like a politician hat and wanting to be viewed as a politician will go on the attack and go negative, 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 right? And will not admit that they have any faults. As a Christian, I believe there's humility in public service. And, I've lived 50 years of life on earth here, and I've made many poor choices in my life. And I think that for me to learn from those choices is what helps us grow, right? And to acknowledge and to say out loud, yeah, that was a bad vote or that was a bad decision, right? But you also have to understand that as a Democrat, I may have voted on Democratic bills a certain way, but I also voted as a Democrat on Republican bills a certain way. And when you look at side by side, my votes compared to local assembly members' votes, they're really not that different. Sometimes I would vote no and they would abstain. Sometimes I would vote yes and they would vote no. So it's very careful to look at those votes. But if you look at the thousands and thousands of votes that we make, there's very few that I can tell you I made bad choices on. And I acknowledge that and I admit that. So in terms of, you talked about Pro Tem McGuire, his job is to lead the Democrats into success. And he and the Democrats failed at that in our last election, by far. Not only did they lose me as a registered Democrat, never in 80 years has a Democrat re-registered as Republican. And for me to do that and to make myself a target and to take the hits and slaps and civil libel suits and all the things that I'm under attack. I mean, even my marriage has been under attack. You don't make that decision lightly. But what I've learned is it's not about me, Marie, the person. This is about a state that I love, and this is about a million constituents that I vowed to represent. And so I will take the hits every single day if that means doing good for my constituents. So that's my own litmus test of value. So in terms of these specific issues, so we talked about the Democrats want to divide us, and they want to divide us on issues like abortion, LGBTQ rights. They want to make these salacious accusations that makes people want to recoil, right? But the reality is this: California is not affordable to live in. So why are we not talking about the issues around affordability, right? Voters, we have passed billions and billions of dollars in propositions to go towards road safety, bridge, water infrastructure. And the Democrats have squandered that money. Why are we not talking about that? Because as long as we're talking about abortion, LGBTQ rights, and all the other things that Pro Tem McGuire wants us to talk about, we're not talking about what's really in the heart and minds of our constituents, right? So I'll tell you again, I am pro-family, and I do not feel that the government should have any right either to tell me to vaccinate my kids or to put my kids in a public education system that is failing them, or to tell me what is a conversation between me and my priest and my doctor. So it's not a black and white issue. But to get to know me, Marie, the senator, I'm not going to give in to those divisive politics that the Democrats want me to give. And it's not an issue that we're going to debate on the Senate floor. And it's not an issue that we're going to debate anymore in California. It's been enshrined now in the Constitution with Prop 1. Unfortunately, we now have, that decision has been taken away from us in terms of those personal rights to our body.
You're about midway to your 4-year term now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, given your 2-year experience and what you've seen so far, where would your priorities lie as far as your work as a legislator in the Senate? Where would you want to take your legislative agenda now to the finish line of before the next election? What would be your priorities?
Right. So number one priority, and this has been since I started, was to unite our constituents around the issues that matter every day, right here at the kitchen table, right? That matters between us and our children, our family, our community, and our business. What are those unifying topics? And over again, what I have heard is basic access to clean, affordable water, right? That is an issue. Even now in 2025, we are talking about access to clean, affordable water, right? So making rural living affordable again is my number one priority. So that means voting against any type of tax increases, which I've done from day one, even as a Democrat. It means severely dismantling the gas tax and all the different fees that are put on fuels here in California. I'm a proponent of local energy. That means whether we're drilling and have good jobs with that drilling, but we should not be importing natural resources that we have here in California. I also believe that we have choices around our energy policy, right? And you see this because, you know, as heads of household, we pay our energy bill every month, right? And there's no explanation why it went up 2 times as high than the month before. And, you know, we ask our kids, did you leave that air conditioning on? Or, you know,
you took more baths than you needed to.
Yeah, but that's where we are in California.
True.
That the decisions being made, these are our dollars and cents decisions being made in our homes are not by elected officials. These are by appointed members that sit on very powerful bodies in Sacramento. So for me, it's really about unifying us on these issues and dismantling these cabooses, if you will, that consistently make affordable living impossible in California. And we can go on and talk about housing and other areas, but that's the fundamental piece. The second thing for me, and this is where I bring my experience, and I tell you, you know, if we throw out reproductive rights and all we talk about is abortion and we give Democrats that stick to talk about, we're missing all those women of non-reproductive age, women that are entering menopause, women that are choosing not to have families, women that are caring for families that they that they took in, maybe not blood families, but that is community, right? Our church families. And so I like to focus on the maturing woman and some of those areas of health and mental health. So I don't know if you knew this, but I've survived cancer twice, and so I've brought my experience forward in saying I want us to focus as legislators on that vast spread of decades and years of the aging woman, right? And start having those conversations because we're seeing so many incidents of cancer even hitting our 20-year-old women, and we have to ask ourselves why. And so it brings us back to that clean water and accessible water. And then last but not least is parental rights. I am a strong advocate for parental rights. I'm bringing my experience in education as well as in special education to ensure that we build a transparency factor on the lack of performance for our young people in public education, and that we make an accounting of those dollars that are misspent and mismanaged. Because when we are asking our teachers to spend money out of their pocket for basic supplies, that to me feels criminal. It feels criminal because we see it in all the taxes that we pay. And again, if we are making it harder for our kids to be successful, I mean, I remember telling my kids, you know, work hard, you know, do your studies, make good choices, follow my teachings or the teachings of the church, and you'll do fine. But that's not where we are anymore. So parental rights and healthcare decisions and in education, that's my third top priority. And of course, there's a lot of different layers in that. You know, there's issues that kind of percolate to the top, like affordability around insurance right now. You know, because my district is so large, I mean, we've weathered wildfires for the past decades. And I've got communities that have been decimated. And where's the tax dollars being allotted for those homes and those communities to rebuild their schools and post offices? But, you know, when it happens in Southern California, you know, Governor Newsom and the Democrats will write a blank check and say, here you go. So that's what I'm fighting for.
We need Dodge in California.
Dodge in California. You know what? We've talked about that and, you know, and kind of, you know, joking aside. But, you know, the reality is that we have a very large overhead. And you remember just a few weeks ago, it hit the news where Governor Newsom said that government employees had to come back to the office after 5 years.
He was mandating them,
right?
yeah.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, we're not in COVID years anymore. We're not, there's no restrictions or anything. So why do public employees get to work from home? And right, it's just like, and we're paying, tax dollars are paying for the rents on these buildings, and we're paying for those supplies. And it just goes to show you that there's so much spending that we don't know about, and that is being hidden in either propositions that are tailored to say a certain thing, and then something else is done instead. There's so many lessons to be learned. But, you know, and this is why I appreciate your podcast, because the average voter, you know, really just wants to be told the truth. Exactly. And they want to know that they can trust their government and their elected officials. And when there's so much shenanigans happening, that's when they lose hope, and that's when they stop voting. And that's when they re-register no party preference, because the trust has been broken.
Or they just step away completely from being involved politically.
That's right.
I want to give you the last word, whatever else you might want to tell your constituents and our audience. Anything you might want to tell them.
Right. Well, I just want to thank you for this chance to talk on your podcast. Welcome. And, you know, having these conversations, I think, is really important. You know, non-scripted, no notes, just really like what comes from the gut, right? I think this is going to be a journey for us, right? If we are going to turn California around, I believe we need to have more balanced representation, and that means having more Republican representation in state offices, in the Senate, in the Assembly, and in congressional positions. I believe we have to look at California as regional political environments rather than one-size-fits-none California policies. I think that rural California needs to be acknowledged for the richness of resources that come from our community, and the dependency that urban markets in California have. I mean, the headwaters in our district is amazing, right? We control the water that goes to the Bay Area. I mean, that's a lot of power when it comes to natural resources. But there has to be some respect, again, and humility in that as public servants, we are here to do good for the public. Not for the common good, not to pad our re-elections. And when the threat is, if you do this, you will not get re-elected, then I just say, bring it on, because I'm here to serve the public for as long as they want. And if you're conflicted about that, pray on it, because that's what I did. That's what I did when I was conflicted on some of the issues that I was voting on as a Democrat, and that's what I did when I finally made my decision to re-register as a Republican. I heard you say that too when you spoke. So, I mean, that would be my advice. I mean, thank you very much. Of course, thank you. Thank you very much for your time. All right, thank you. And that's it for us, folks, on Public Huddle. Again, this has been your host, Jake Leachko. Would like to thank Senator Maria Alvarado-Gil for giving us her time and for all the advice to us as to how we could cooperate in bringing back our Golden State to its former glory that it has lost. Thank you. Right? Yes. We'll get there. I have hope. I really do. Yeah, I think so too. Yes. And with the help of our audience, with the help of everybody's cooperation to pursue that goal, I think we can see something done here. Right. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. If somebody wants to get a hold of me or my office, please, How do you tell them? They can reach out to you also. I can reach out to you. But we try to be as accessible as possible. Yes. We have an office here in Modesto and also Alvarado-Gil. That's right. And then obviously in the Capitol office. But you can, Google me, or we'll put a link up, or put a link there. We'll put a link after the podcast. We'll put a link on the description. Sounds good. And we're here to serve constituents. So any issues at all, any obstacles, you're not alone. We are here to serve you, and my team is willing and ready. Our door's open. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you.